Welcome everyone back to The Level Set. I'm here with Larry Fields and Mike Jones to talk about what's happening around our country and around our world today. So much is going on, gentlemen, that I want to dive right into. The thing that stands out for me this morning is congratulations, Ketanji Brown Jackson, first Black woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. She's apparently an extremely accomplished jurist, a brilliant judge who we hope is going to set that court on a course of recovery and equilibrium to some extent, to the extent that she can. But that court is where I'm landing this morning, Larry and Mike. It's an activist court. It's an extremist court. It's a conservative court. Many of the justices that have tilted it in the direction that it is currently heading, where great harm is being done, were appointed by Donald Trump, a criminal that lost the popular vote. More people voted for the other guy. One of the seats that he's appointed a judge to was held open in violation of the terms of appointing judges back when Barack Obama was president, and he wanted to put Merrick Garland on the bench. And Mitch McConnell told him no, because it's too late in the term. And then in the last couple of 2 weeks of Donald Trump's term, Mitch McConnell rams through the appointment of a Supreme Court judge. I can't remember which one it was. I lose them in a cloud of, the BS that they throw up. But
it was Amy Coney.
Amy Coney Barrett. Okay.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue, because joining us this morning is the Level Set's own Gerald Christmas, off of a jury trial that he took the verdict yesterday.
Yeah, and I understand he got the verdict he needed. Which, congratulations, brother Christmas. We always appreciate your outstanding work.
Thank you.
Yeah, we always appreciate you and your outstanding work in the community as it continues. We're talking this morning a little bit about this activist Supreme Court and the great harm that is being done, and what is going to be our response in a republic that they are destroying all around us. We were talking about the Roe v. Wade decision and the broader implications of that, and how it really is part of a whole attack on civil rights, period. They just rendered a decision yesterday that makes it harder in an environmental crisis where we have a limited time to get things together for our children and grandchildren. The world that they're going to made it harder to go after companies that pollute through their emissions and accelerate the demise of our environment rather than protect it. Add that to Roe v. Wade. Add that to the gun laws. They struck down New York City's gun law that has been in existence for 111 years, with the logic that it's okay for the states to decide. That is the federal governments can make decisions about. I can't remember how it was, to be honest, but I know it's in conflict with Roe v. Wade. The logic that they used for one was the exact opposite of the logic that they used for the other, because the end point was the goal. They will do whatever legal gymnastics they need to do to undermine and destroy those rights and protections that most directly affect Black people. I wanted to hear from you all this morning about your thoughts on the direction we're heading, where we need to be, while we recognize the direction we're in.
Mike Jones, why don't you lead the way, please?
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Really, I was thinking as you were talking, your last comment, there is a consistent logic to the Roe Wade decision as well as the New York decision. They're both tied back to this rather primitive notion of reconnecting America to the 18th, 19th century. Because literally, the rationale in both of them was that you couldn't do this today because they didn't address it in the Constitution in the 18th and 19th century. And in the gun decision for New York, it was about what was the historical gun regulations what were gun regulations historically. And then in the Roe Wade decision, it was what was the status of abortion in the 19th century. So literally, the longer historical arc of this is at the beginning of the Enlightenment, as the Enlightenment took off, which was about a science-based view of reality, and call it a secular view of reality. There was always pushback from the establishment, which was a religious-based reality, basically the Catholic Church. And that's one of the interesting things about Western philosophy after the Greeks and the Romans. But it's always been a God-centric justification for the universe, where most philosophy is trying to figure out what's the physical reality. They don't discount religion, but they don't make that the centerpiece of the philosophy. So, but religion in the West for 1,000 years, the church in the West, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, was not just the church, it was also the secular political authority. And it was the way that the nobility controlled the masses. And it was this is what you got to do because God wills it, etc. And it ordered the society, and you couldn't violate any of that. So from Martin Luther attacking the things on the door, all that happened was a result of the church and that political system was so backward, so reactionary. It created the blowback, and as people just got to be smarter and more aware, basically Europeans became more exposed to what the Muslim, the golden age of Islam, which basically saved all the Greek and Roman thinking and kept it translated and added to it. So that's where we get algebra from. That's where we get our numerical figure, 1 to 0. All of that comes from someplace else, but it started to seep back into Europe. So what we're looking back at is the generation of, and I'm calling white cavemen, who have always wanted to restore a hierarchical society based on some superstition and oppressive theology. It's really no different than the Taliban or the Iranian rulers. It's the same stuff, man. I mean,
right.
that the fight in civilization has always been, how does reason conquer superstition and ignorance? And if you're at the top of a society because everybody is superstitious and ignorant, the last thing you want to see is the society that starts to evolve towards the light. And that's literally the enlightenment comes from a Greek term, Latin term, really about the light, which really meant was people becoming aware of who they are, how the universe works. So we should be looking at this. There's two ways to look at it. We can look at it as at a broader term about how does ignorance and passions reconquer the public space, and that's true at an existential level. And then it's the Black reality of what that means for us in America. And we're the tip of the spear for change that we used to be. And we're usually the canary in the coal mine when things go bad. So I would argue that the pushback against us as civil rights, against gay rights or whatever, is really trying to restore this reactionary political hegemony that has never really gone away, that has
Right.
always sought to reimpose itself every chance that it gets. And what saddens me is, outside of level check, I don't know where you can find 4 Black people or even 1 Black person in the integrated audience on television even talking about it in these terms. And everybody's still talking about the little superficial what's happening to our democracy and all that nonsense. And really, we need first-rate thinking that's informed, that can tie this moment back to these other moments, so that we understand that this has been an ongoing struggle of ignorance of reason over ignorance ever since we first got out the cage. Okay,
Hey, and Mike, as I get ready to throw it to Gerald, your points were excellent. And when I throw this to you, Gerald, he jogged my memory about the contradiction. It was that the court ruled that essentially, states could not be responsible or had competence to regulate guns, but they certainly can regulate women's bodies. Same court rendering 2 totally different decisions, but the ultimate impact, as Mike points out, is to undermine and destroy civil rights and civil liberties and the protections of marginalized groups. But Gerald, you've been observing this court, I know, and I know you have some thoughts on it. Can you weigh in on where you think things are headed? Because when we see the decision that they rendered yesterday relative to the EPA, environmental protections, which really was just bowing to their corporate overseers, what do you see?
I think the court is going to continue to go in this same direction. This is what this court was appointed to do, and they're carrying out that mission. I think what you are seeing is how, when we have these Supreme Court confirmation hearings, how the justices are just going through the process, but you're not getting any honesty in those Supreme Court confirmation hearings. They have an agenda. They're just not going to tell you that agenda. But it's clear that when Trump appointed these justices to the Supreme Court, they made some concessions to him in order to get appointed to the Supreme Court. And now they're following through with them. And they've become very confident and courageous in the decisions that they're going to make. And regardless if these decisions are going to be against what the greater public may want, they have already decided that this is going to be the agenda for the country. And they've signaled with the Roe v. Wade decision to the individuals that were involved in the insurrection that the court is going to be behind them. They're going to support them. That's how I see it. Yeah. And I think that what Mike said was extremely important about enlightenment. As Larry said, I just came off of a jury trial in St. Louis County. And it was a big win. It was a good win for me in a criminal case, attempted rape trial. But as I was waiting for the jury to come back, you have a lot of dead time just, sitting around the courthouse to observe everything going on. And Mike, one thing that I noticed is that we need a major enlightenment campaign for our people, because I saw so many people coming in and out of court inappropriately. So many people, I'm talking about so many Black people unrepresented, so many people not knowing, what to say or what to do So at a certain point, I'm just sitting there, I just start volunteering information because, you know, you could hear them making the wrong decisions. You could hear them, you know, not knowing how to address these situations. And you just thinking about how often is this happening every day, all day? And how is it our people have got to the point where we just don't have a clue? You know, we don't even know how to dress to come to court. You know, we don't even know, you know, what to say, how we're supposed to be defending ourselves, how to respond. And the courts are well aware of this too. You know, it's happening on both sides because they really shouldn't even be allowing these individuals to come in and address this court this way, you know, with their freedom in jeopardy, because they don't even have a clue what they're supposed to be doing. And the court knows they don't have a clue, and they're taking advantage of that. And we've been taken advantage of in so many different sectors that we, or maybe the pressure from what the court is going to do and the way that they're trying to turn society is going to force us to go back to some of the norms and processes that we had that Mike talks about occurred when he was a young man growing up or a young boy growing up. That's just how I see it. But I don't know, how do you organize a mass movement to educate our people? But that's what we need. We need a mass movement for our people because we got several generations right now that just don't have a clue. They don't even have an understanding of what's going on.
Larry, to Gerald's point, we don't understand in many instances what's going on. I say we, I mean the community, the larger community, our larger community, for a number of different reasons. And when I circle back to that Supreme Court, which one of its first acts was to eviscerate the Voting Rights Act in Shelby. Now about to hear a case that will put a period at the end of that sentence that would allow for states to become the ultimate decision makers in terms of presidential elections. We decide who won in our state versus the voters. What do you see on the horizon, man? You've heard Mike, you've heard Gerald. What are your thoughts on some of what they've shared already? Because I think they're on point.
I am reminded of that Negro leader in the Rocky saga, Mr. T, when they asked him about his prognostication about a fight. And his word was a one-word answer: pain. And that's what we have if we do not rally ourselves. We're going to endure some pain, some additional pain. The bottom line, Gerald, and you can attest to this, and the two of you all can attest to this. In law school, when we read the cases, you could tell the races of the parties, you know, by the way the case flowed and the outcome. And there is, I mean, we're acting like this is new, but there has always been an ends justify the means with these courts. Yeah, we have had some successes because we've had attorneys and activists that have walked on, and politicians that had heart and were able to walk on water. But this is America. And so I'm not surprised at all. And to Mike's point, there's absolutely no coincidence that there is a political attack on what is known as CRT. And they don't even know what that is. You ask one of these folks that's hollering no CRT what it is, and you tell them you know I give you $1 million. They couldn't define it. I mean, no more than they could define the difference between Obamacare and the CARES Act. They couldn't define either one of them. You know, so the fact of the matter is that this is absolutely nothing new. What this is, we're watching, and I think we're giving Trump too much credit, because this ain't Trump. This is a 50-year plan from Mitch McConnell and the Federalist Society to do exactly what Mike said. White males have never relinquished the desire to control everything. And the fact that they were looking to be out of numbers, and the math was not mathing for them, they have now decided to take all the gloves off. And they are going to peel back all of the rights. And we continue to believe that the South, that the South relented. That's never happened. First of all, the reason you call it the United States is a fiction. So we can appear to be United States. We are still dealing with foreign entities inside of this criminal enterprise. That's why, when there is a dispute between states, one state is called a foreign state in the United States. And so this notion that the South has ever given up and has acquiesced to the Union is a falsity. And this notion that the Supreme Court, and I was naive for years, thinking that the Supreme Court was an anti-political body. It is not.
Right.
It is not. And and they have one agenda, and that's to maintain the status quo. Every now and then, you'll get an empowering decision from them. Every now and then, just enough to keep people from flooding the streets to riot. Because you see, they came back. That one of their last holdings for this period was to somewhat increase prisoners' rights, and to throw that folly out. But this is absolutely nothing new. It's very consistent. The Voters' Rights Act decimated, EPA decimated, the New York gun laws, and they prayer in school. Now, I never stopped praying in school. I never did. But the bottom line is that they have adopted a Jim Brown's mentality. We're going, we're running on the right side of this line. We're gonna run you over. Get down or lay down. Like beans in Philadelphia.
Right.
And that's where we are. So
Right.
the issue is the question that you ask is, what do we need to do? We've got to educate. We've got to vote like our lives depended on it. We have got to rally the
Because our
wagons.
lives do depend on it.
Exactly. We have got to, we are going to have to get out of our comfort zones. Those of us that do not want to step out and think that we can make our money and fade to the shadows, that is gone. You're not, because there is absolutely no cover for any Black person. And Gerald, you're right. What has happened is, I was in court 2 Fridays ago. I had to go to court for a case in which they're trying to roll back some rights that one of my clients had previously established, and just so happened to be in the same courtroom that you tried your case. And it was a day where the probation officer was having check-ins with the court and individuals that were on probation. And it was the absolute worst thing I've seen in a long time. You had these you had the court basically speaking to folks like they had just gotten out of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
It was as if, I'm telling you, your probation officer knows, this, you should, he has experience in this, do you have a job? Were you living at home with your mother? Are you trying to help her, with her bills? How much money are you owning? $15 an hour. Okay, that's very good. It was I thought I was back in the 1910s. But that's where we are. We've allowed our minds to just turn to mush. And I think it has something to do with the way things have materialized. Everything is done in a hurry. We don't have any patience. We don't play the long game. If we can't get it done in 2 months, we move on to something else. And I really do believe, if we have individuals, marketers that have learned how to tap in to or brain to the point where the stimulation is identical to the same stimulation that one has in when having sex or eating chocolate. Our kids are being brought up stimulated like that. And I just don't think that they can put the cognitive thought together for this long game. And so we're going to have to we're going to have to work at this thing harder and longer. One more last thing about the Supreme Court. Understand this. This Supreme Court has a religious agenda, so-called religious agenda, but it's a white agenda. You can transpose, white for religious agenda. And they're going to be textualists when that's in their benefit.
Right.
They're going to be non-textualists when that's in their benefit. So the issue is, how do we counteract the fact that the Republicans during the 1990s and the early 2000s took over all these state houses and they control them? How do we counteract that? We got to vote. We got to run. We got to kick the bums out that aren't doing anything for us. And we got to, and we've got to understand that this is an existential threat.
Agreed.
Larry, I'm glad you raised that last point. And we need a better understanding of just practical politics. Since I've been saying we created this entrepreneurial political class. So everything has really been about somebody's personal career. We need to be more elected officials. I find it striking when I think back over my political lifetime that the Congressional Black Caucus was politically more effective and influenced the national policy when it was 17 of them or 14 of them in the late 60s or early 70s. Then they are with 56 of them in 2000 and in the 2020. So just think about that, okay? That we used to get more done politically with fewer people.
Why do you think that is?
People, and we get less done. And I think it comes to because we don't think about politically long game. I've thought about people complaining, like I think it's the Florida case, or where they wiped out 2 Black congressional districts, and you couldn't have them, and we're complaining about that. Where the reality is, if you just think like a politician who's interested in power, are we better off as Black folks in having 3 representatives in a legislative body that they can't do anything in? Or are we better off with 1 in the legislative body and the rest of us in 2 other districts that we can change who the white representative would be if we're playing a long game? Okay, that we are the difference maker in this other situation. So we got extraordinary leverage. Because here's what happens. Every time I want to be something, I got to give up something to you to support me. When you want to be something, you got to give up something to me. For a long time, Baltimore under Parham Mitchell had a really robust Black political machine. The city was predominantly Black for a long time and had a white mayor. But the white mayor was always a progressive liberal guy that accommodated everything in the Black community. So they took their political power rather than take the marginal power and try to create a Black office holder. They maximized their marginal power by picking the white guy. And the white guy that they picked could not be the mayor without them. Can't be the senator. Because I used to see that the leverage of old school Black politicians was white boys couldn't be who they wanted to be unless they came to see these brothers. And it's in when you come to see me, that I can exact the price from you. If I want to be something, then I got to go see you. Richard Daley was probably one of the most powerful politicians in America, the old man, because he didn't want to be anything but the mayor of Chicago. And you couldn't be nothing in America unless you came to see the mayor of Chicago. That's understanding the difference between power versus celebrity. And we got all these people talk to us. We got to have more. I don't necessarily need more. I need the best. If we take a military analogy, I'll just make it up for a difference. I can have a army invade the place, or I can have a company of Navy SEALs go in and take care of my business for me. Now, either way, so the question is, which is the most efficient way of militarily achieving my objective? Sometimes it's with a whole army. A lot of times it's with, now send these 12. Because what I need done don't take an army, but it does take 12 killers who know what they're doing. We used to understand politics like that. That when we go send somebody, when it don't cost us nothing. But right now, we need to take what we got and use it to leverage for group benefit. And that's why Black people supported Black political leadership. The reason Black people don't support Black political leadership in any enthusiastic way is because all we get out of that is you got a job. If we didn't get nothing, you got a job. Okay, and then you come back here crying and bitching to me because now you ain't got a job no more. Well, I didn't get nothing, and Barack Obama is the classic example of that. We got the president. No, we ain't got nothing. He got a job. But you got more out of Lyndon Johnson than you ever got out of Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. And you got more out of Black congressmen when Bill Clay was in Congress, when he went to Congress in 1968, than you did from Lacey when he went 38 years later. Now, I'm not knocking individuals. I am talking about a different political construct and a different political reality. And it goes back to our favorite sport, basketball. Say, son, I don't need you to be a shooter. I need people who will play inside the context of this team. And on this team, I need you to do X. What we got is a junior college team. Everybody shoots, independent of what's in the best interest of the team, because everybody's trying to get to the next level. They're not trying to win the game. And that's all right at junior college, because junior college coaches know that's why they're here. But that's a terrible way to run a team if you're trying to win games.
Dr. Charles Alexander, I understand that you've been able to join us. Welcome back to The Level Set. We've been talking a little bit about the Supreme Court this morning and the direction that it's clearly headed and the direction that it's dragging the country. These unelected folks appointed by people who lost the majority of an election. And the need for us to recognize that there is a definite need for an intentional, proactive move on our part, given the circumstances around us. And I know you think in those terms generally. Can you weigh in for us this morning, man, on your thoughts about what you've seen most recently in terms of some of the decisions that have been rendered and the impacts that they're going to have? I'm thinking about Roe v. Wade. We're talking about the decision that was rendered yesterday relative to the environmental protections that they rolled all the way back, giving their corporate overseers the freedom to put toxins out into the environment at a still higher rate. They blew up the Voting Rights Act a few years back. That was the first order of business. Now they're about to hear a case that would allow for states to become the final determinant in terms of election outcomes, as they desired it to be this last go round when they tried to go back and say, hey, states, didn't you see some fraud? Wink, wink. didn't you see some fraud in the elections? Send us some different elect. They're trying to legitimize that now, or they will be once that case makes it to the Supreme Court. It's already headed that way. Dr. Alexander, what are your thoughts this morning on what's happening?
And I think another ruling was that, with regard to Miranda, that police can no longer be sued or charged when they don't offer Miranda, when they don't provide Miranda rights. And so a couple of things. A, we're very easily distracted, and so so many of these things can go on. We're not paying attention. We're paying attention to the BET Awards this week, and it's those types of things that they hit us hard because people aren't aware, and then even when people have some relative awareness, they're very dismissive. And I was talking to a sister the other day, and I asked her what she thought about the Roe ruling, and she was like, it ain't nothing, because it's gonna get to a point where they're gonna have to reinstate it. And I was like, how is that gonna happen? And she said well, because enough people will just violate the law that eventually they're gonna have to change it back. I said, they who? And she just had no concept of what just occurred, and what it is that we're up against. And she was, she's like, this is what they do all the time. It'll go back before the court, and we don't understand. Some of us don't understand. Some of us don't understand. Some of us don't care. Maybe some of us don't understand, and a lot of us don't care. But so we're in this space where, as we've said so many times before, where we have to have some very intentional kind of engagement programs for our folks, in this whole space of civics, and helping people to understand again what the stakes are, what all of these, what the various political and legislative bodies mean and do, how you get there, why you get there, and what does it mean for Black folks. So that's the other thing, we still got Black folks that say, I ain't political, because they don't have a sense of, what this whole thing means. It's just politics. I ain't political. Or they ain't gonna do nothing for us, but not having any appreciation for the fact that, to Mike Jones' point, if we're thoughtful and we move as a team, we can get done what we want to get done. But we're not even doing that on the local level to get done what we need to get done. So since we ain't doing it on a local level, everything sucks at, the state and then national level, because we don't understand.
Well put. Gerald Christmas, in terms of the legal community, I heard you talk about something, I heard Larry talk about something. And then you described the need for a massive effort to raise the level of awareness in our community about the kinds of things that you've observed, what's at stake more than anything. Because when I look at these Supreme Court rulings, man, and I forgot the Miranda piece, but it's a part of a whole attack on the rights of marginalized communities, particularly Black communities, a rollback in a fight that's never ended. Reconstruction after the civil rights represents a continuing effort to undermine, whatever progress might have been made at any point in our nation's history. But this media space, man, to your point, Dr. Alexander, we can get millions of our eyes on the BET Awards and with opinions, as if that's a substantive thing that needs to be weighed in on. You need to be thinking about it. We've got thoughts about it versus a conversation like this. Because I think the answer to your question, Gerald, and we've said this on this show from its inception, the purpose of this show even is to get into that space where you reach the most people with good information so that you can empower people to make better decisions and organize themselves, ourselves, to move us in the direction that we need to be going in a country and a republic that's collapsing all around us, starting with the rights, ostensibly, that would have extended to us to allow us to even function in this society. And I think this is the space where some of that work must be done. Joe, did you have a thought on that? Is Gerald still with us? All right. Well, I'll throw it out to the panel.
He's
man.
with us, but
Still here. I'm here.
Okay.
I think one of the problems is those algorithms. When you talk about people tuning into the BET Awards, if you get on social media and you start looking at certain things, that's what you're going to constantly get fed. And due to the algorithms, our people are constantly getting fed this negativity. And, I saved that column that Mike wrote about the power of one. When you talk about us having the numbers, but we just don't have the players. And that's where the problem lies with us, is that we have the numbers like he talked about in the caucus, but we just don't have the players with the courage to go out and do the things that need to be done. And we have to figure out how we're going to put some pressure on them to get that done. And then even at a local level, especially here in St. Louis, we have to get the Black lawyers to engage, Larry, because, we look around the country at the engagement of Black lawyers locally in politics, and it's much higher than what it is here. One of the things that I noticed is that even though my client was acquitted on the most serious charge, but convicted on a minor charge, which I was fine with, and he had already been on bond for over a year. He had done enough jail time already to serve if he was given the full amount for the charge that he was convicted of. He was on electronic monitoring, working with a family, and the judge still took him off of bond yesterday to hold him for sentencing. And that's because the judge was also a former federal prosecutor, and they all are working together. And we have to start organizing around these local judges that get placed on the bench. We really need to get rid of the nonpartisan court plan and have these judges run. We would have a better opportunity to have judges more diverse on the bench if they were being elected as opposed to being appointed, and they wouldn't necessarily all be coming from this prosecutorial mindset where the whole system is on that side, the whole prosecutorial side, the whole conservative side. But the Black lawyers, the local Black lawyers, are going to have to engage more. You think about Atlanta, and you think about all the Black mayors of Atlanta. I think just about all the Black mayors of Atlanta have been Black attorneys, with the exception of maybe, I think it's maybe Shirley Clark that was not an attorney, but overall.
Bottom's an attorney?
Yes, Keisha's an attorney.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But, we haven't had a Black attorney here engage in being the mayor of St. Louis since Freeman Bosman. And you think about how long ago that's been. And we just sitting on the sidelines, and we have the knowledge. And we know better, but we sitting on the sidelines not saying enough. And, you know, we're going to have to engage more on a local level, because a lot of this stuff that happens locally is going to affect you much faster than the Supreme Court decisions are. Politics is all local. And especially in the St. Louis metropolitan area, we have got to get more engagement from our Black enlightened population, because everybody is just comfortable in the position that they are. And I believe they're taking a position where it's not bothering me. So I'm not going to say anything, or either, especially with the attorneys, I'm trying to get appointed to something. So I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers, because that's going to stop me from getting any kind of appointment. And that's the other reason why I would like to get rid of the nonpartisan court.
Hey, that non-feather ruffling is a hell of a thing.
Ready?
Go ahead, Mike.
Let me hop in here just for this minute. The advantage to me being older than you guys is I've gotten chance. I got a chance to see Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain in their prime, and I also saw Black politics operate differently. You don't want to elect judges. We used to have Theodore McMillan came from Black politics. That Black politicians cut a deal at some point to say we need a Black federal judge. Whoever was running for the Senate to say that's part of the deal, you got it. White folks didn't pick McMillan. Black politicians picked McMillan. And the way there used to be a cliche that what is a judge? He said a judge is a lawyer that knows a politician. But they got vetted through their activity, and you could put them in the game because you knew they were going to be reliable. We got all these folks now. All y'all now is your cohort of lawyers in your age groups and on down. They think being a judge is a career position, and let me apply, etc. And your point that I'm trying to get appointed, I don't want to ruffle no feathers. 50 years ago, you couldn't get appointed unless you was a feather ruffler, because the Black politicians who were going to get you appointed wasn't going to appoint no water weak somebody that they couldn't depend on to do the right thing on behalf of Black folks. So this democratizing of our politics, connecting it from our overall condition and everybody doing something for the advancement of their personal benefit, has created this. We do our politics the way white folks do theirs, and it may work for white folks, but it's a mess for us. So you'll never have anybody in the room. Because I used to get calls, somebody said, would you write a letter for so-and-so to be, he's going for the panel, she's going for the panel. And I would always tell people, I don't know them, okay? I can't put my name behind somebody. I ain't got no clue. And then sometimes I would know them, but the answer to myself would be not, no, hell no, okay? Because I know at the end of the day, you ain't gonna be reliable and trust. Going back to the basketball metaphor, at the end of the game, Riddick, you got the 5 players on the floor that may not be the best, but they're the 5 you trust the most. Because at the end of the game, decisions got to be made that impact the outcome. And I got to be able to trust your judgment out there in those moments. I can't send you forward to represent us, whether it's on the court, in an administration, if you're not going to be in that space. Quick short story. One of the first jobs I had was assistant director of financial aid at UMSL. I was 25, 26 years old. I had gone to school out there, being an activist, and the dean of admissions was an older white guy from Southeast Missouri. And he just And I was out there one day and he asked me, did I want to be the assistant director of financial aid? And he hired me just like that. And I guess I had been on the job about 3 months, and he sent a young brother to talk to me. And then I talked to him, told him about financial aid and how I worked and stuff. And he called me down to his office later that afternoon. He said, did you talk to the young man I sent up there? I said, yes, sir. I told him about financial aid. And he asked me, what did I think? And I started to explain to him what I told him about financial aid. He said, no, that's not what I mean. He said, he's a marginal admittee. There's a reason to let him in. There's a reason not to let him in. I want to know what you think about it. And is this somebody we ought to take a chance on? He said, so when I send you somebody to talk to, I ain't sending them to you to talk to about financial
aid.
I'm sending them for you to tell me, is this a guy that we ought to bet on? Okay, if you say so, I'm good. Now, I was 25, 26 years old when I got told that by an old white guy from Southeast Missouri, because the other thing he said is, that's the reason you here, because the only way Black students are going to get a fair shake at the University of Missouri is if somebody Black gives it to them, okay? And that resonated with me the rest of my life, that I understood that the reason I'm in the room is for the people who can't get in the room. Mm-hmm. And if I ain't willing to do that, then don't let me in the room. Don't ever send anybody in the room that you don't trust to be there when you can't be there for yourself. That's what this is all about. This ain't about advancing people of color. It's about advancing people who will represent effectively and aggressively people of color. What I said before, the answer to a Black question ain't necessarily African American. Okay.
Let me add a layer to what you just said, Mike.
Thomas, I'm taking the old white man every time.
Yeah, a layer to what you just said. Not only do we need to know that a person is going to advocate in spaces where we can't be on behalf of the community, but that has to be whether it's public or private. It can't just be on camera. I need to know that when the cameras ain't rolling, right, that you on our team. That if nobody else is around, you are still on our team. And I think that's an important piece of that. Gerald, it looked like you were getting ready to weigh in. Or Dr. Alexander.
I was agreeing with what Mike said about don't ever send them in the room if you can't trust them to make the right decision if you're not in there.
Right, cameras or no cameras, right? Dr. Alexander, did you also have something you want to weigh in? I don't know if I saw you or not. I think I did.
Yeah, and this is both to Mike's points and to Attorney Christmas's points. Like the other piece is we don't have so we don't know who to send. We're not necessarily clear on, like we don't have our vetting process is again totally dependent on FaceTime. So the person that we think can represent us is the person who get to be on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea like who might have boots on the ground and what those boots on the ground mean. And we have no idea what have been forever our needs. We need we need educational resources, we need health resources, we always need housing resources. I mean, we have some very, very fundamental needs. And again, we don't seem to appreciate that as the space in which we need to do work. And we don't look to the people in those spaces to to help to elevate them, to support them in what they do on behalf of us. We're more likely, if somebody gets in, however they got in, to say, back to that ruffle a feather piece, we don't need them to ruffle a feather because then they can't stay. As opposed to the more feather ruffling they do, the more we gonna help them. We're gonna support them so they gonna stay. And so we'll lay down and we won't ask for much because you'd be like, well, they're gonna get them on up out of there. Like, but they who? You today. You don't want to vote for for this space. And we don't understand that. We don't understand that, and we don't move in that direction. We back to the court. Somebody was, I'm sure there was people very, very, very happy. And I think sister, ascended to her seat yesterday, or she's going to ascend to the seat today, and have
She was
no
sworn
idea.
yesterday. She was sworn
Okay.
in yesterday, yeah.
But have no idea about the magnitude of the rulings earlier in the week, because they are more concerned about the symbolic nature of what just occurred. And and if you have any conversation, like even during the vetting process, when there were people raising questions about her politics, you had this whole contingent of and I don't know if this starts with sisters or if this starts with the enemy and they get the sisters charged and they be like, oh, here we go, hating on the Black woman again. We can't have a critical discussion about this person's politics and the degree to which what she has done in the past might impact us. And it was the same thing with Kamala. When people raise issues about her politics, folks, oh no. Y'all never want no sister to do that. But we have to ask these kind of questions in order to know what it is we're gonna get. But
yeah.
These end up being, these are the types of things that trip us up because we're not ready to go into the game.
Right. And Dr. Alexander, Larry made a point, and I'm coming to you, Larry. Earlier, we weren't on the air yet, but Mike was talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that lens, that DEI, which is so integral to corporate dialogues all over the country now. And it's kind of a representative politics, just in terms literally of your folks are represented by this person's presence here. But that's a very shallow, in some instances, approach to things, because as you was mentioning before we came on the air, man, that DEI can do more harm than good if it becomes something that is just of symbolic value and not substantive in terms of a person's policy, ideology, experience, lived experience, reflecting in efforts to further the best interests of the Black community. I wanted you to circle back to that, if you would, Larry, and just kind of put a period at the end of that sentence.
Well, someone raised it on this show a couple of weeks ago. Thurgood Marshall stating the Black snake is just as bad as a white snake. And that's it. When in fact you have an overseer that's Black that perpetuates the exact same mindset and mores of an abusive system, you don't have, there's no gain there. They had Black overseers doing slavery. There's absolutely nothing to be gained by that, man. And we continue, and it's been raised on this show. I think Dr. Alexander months ago raised when we were talking about LeBron's son and his new contract. But that's great for them. That is great. But what about for the collective? And we don't think about that. We don't have individuals that think like Mike Jones did and his generation and us. I guarantee you the vast majority, all five of us have never seen ourselves differently from the Black community. Our interests are aligned there. And what's good for us has got to be good for the Black community. And so we don't have that. What an abusive system has to have in order to continue to be structurally relevant is they have to have incorporation of those that it has conquered. And that's what diversity and inclusion too often is. There are some people in there that are saying, hey, I'm going to have a trail of Black folks follow behind me. We're going to try and change them. But by and large, and I know this because, yeah, I sue companies, you know, every week. I'm suing another company or entity or school district or university every week. And, you know, the number one problem for Black women in this town is that the vast majority of them that are in corporate America on a scale of 1 to 10 are 7 and 8s, and they report to white women that are 5s and 6s, and that's an inherent issue. And then the second issue becomes Black males that are oppressive to Black women and other Black males. Because they will do, these companies have learned to hide their hands tremendously. And I'm not saying that I don't have white male defendants. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, by and large, those two spectrums are the ones I get the vast majority of it. So this notion, you know, this rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic to try and talk, you know, beat our chest about how far we come is folly.
Larry, you triggered a thought as you were talking with me. When is the last time in our current environment, in this current time frame, where you've heard Black leadership at any level criticize the system? Okay, and I was kept thinking about my entry into this space as a young man, first in college student activist and then in politics. We wasn't talking about white people. We were talking about the system white people had. And we wasn't trying to change white people. We were trying to change the system. And you can't find a Black politician, male or female, that in today's time will, other than an AOC and a couple sisters in the squad, that will talk about the system is the problem.
I'll throw Kim Gordon in there, man.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I said sisters. So what I'm saying, but she's now a Black political outlier.
Yeah.
And 40 years ago, she'd have been par for the course. Okay, if you couldn't have got to where she was without being who she was. Now she's where she is in spite of who she is. Okay, and that's my point. Our inability to look at what our condition is and come up with a rational analysis that speaks to solutions. And fundamentally, there's what you were saying. You change the color of the overseers, you ain't changed the system. Okay, the oppression is still there, the injustice is still there, and that's what you got to fight. And you got to look for allies who are opposed to injustice and oppression. Basically, if you Django, Stephen is as much your enemy, Samuel L. Jackson is as much your enemy as Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie. And the same thing was supposed to happen to both of them. Samuel L. Jackson don't get the Black pass. Ain't no Black pass for a brother like that. So if you take John Danforth with his latest effort, and I happen to know Senator Danforth, got along well with him, think highly of him.
I got a question about him for you later. Yeah, go ahead.
But my man, you gave anybody who picked Clarence Thomas and Josh Hawley don't get to pick nobody else.
You don't get another stage ever.
Right.
Yeah, you pick. Those were your calls. You picked Clarence Thomas, and 30 years later, you picked Josh Hawley. Obviously, your judgment ain't got no better about who to pick.
Right.
So That's how we have to look at this. And we just have lost that internal capacity. And I don't know how we get it back. I really don't, because I agree with Charles and the algorithms and what we have not, we're like kids on sugar. Okay. And at a certain point in time, you know, we got to put the soda down, the candy down. He said, right, because I'll never get your attention if you that amped up in your normal course of doing business. And we're missing larger, more thorough analysis or critiques of our situation. And too many of us get paid, make a living accommodating the system. And 50 years ago, 75 years ago, you couldn't be black making a living accommodating the system. The only way you had a chance to be okay was to oppose the system. And when you oppose the system, you had to support the black people. Right. That's why Marion Barry, despite the last part of his career in his life,
care about that part.
Black folks don't care about that. Coleman Young, black folks don't care about that. Maynard, black folks, you couldn't say nothing, but don't make no difference. Okay, that's y'all problem with it. That'll never be our problem.
Never be mine.
Right. And that's why we don't have black support for black political leadership. We don't have real black political leadership.
Thank you for bringing our discussion full circle.
Let's not let the suburban white mom that voted for all these folks that are now out in the streets, flooding the streets about women's rights, and let's not, at least not forget about RBG, who wanted to be replaced by the first woman president. In other words, I don't want this black man to replace me. All of that had to help shape this form of the Supreme Court. So shout out to both of them.
Right.
Hey, and thank you, brothers, for bringing this conversation full circle. That does bring us to the end of our discussion this morning. But the place to find that substantive discussion and analysis that you described, Mike, is right here on the Level Set. Every week, we're here. We expect you to be here with us. We got work to do. We'll see you next time.